Hello everyone, my name is Kevin Xu, and today I'll be presenting based from the article Procrastination, Deadlines and Performance, Self-Control by Pre-Commitment. Let's go through the agenda first. We'll be first speaking upon the introduction and context, followed by the pilot studies, followed by Study 1, the free choice/no free choice study, Study 2, proofreading study, and ending off with a general discussion. So first of all, what is procrastination? And what is self-control? Well, procrastination for us students especially is all too familiar. Right when we receive a homework, something that's due next week, many of us would not start doing the homework right when we get it, but rather maybe 1 or 2 days before it is actually due. Many of us would like to go on diets as well. We would say to ourselves that, maybe this is just the last time I want to eat this candy. And the day after, you would say, that today is the last day I'll be eating candy. And so we would continually to push everything backwards, to push everything back. And why do we do this? It's because of our normative reasons. We want sweets. We are lazy. But some people know that they are lazy, so that's why they would like to impose self-control on themselves. And so based on the research article, Procrastination, Deadline, and Performance, we will be answering 3 questions. First question, are people willing to self-impose meaningful deadlines to overcome procrastination? Second question, are self-imposed deadlines effective in improving task performance? Thirdly, we will be answering when self-imposing deadlines, do people set them optimally for maximum performance enhancement? So now let's talk about the pilot studies. The 2 pilot studies took place within the context of a semester-long course at MIT. And participants for this study were students in the class, and as part of their course requirement, had to either write 3 short papers or 1 short paper. The instructor explained that each student was free to choose the date by when they want to hand in the papers, but that the deadlines had to be announced in advance and were binding. This means that if they were to submit their papers after the deadlines that they imposed, then they were subject to the consequences of submitting assignments late. Let's take a look at the results. In the first pilot study, the mean deadline across all 3 papers was 21.2 days before the end of the course. And this result from pilot study 1 shows that the students are able to set deadlines well before the last day of class. And to rule out the possibility that students self-impose deadlines because of a preference for distributing events evenly, they created pilot study 2 where they only gave students 1 single task. The mean self-imposed deadline in this case, however, was 41.59, which is even more than the 3-paper one. And this suggests that setting early deadlines is strategic, is a great strategy, and not just an outcome of a desire to space tasks evenly. From the pilot study, we are able to conclude that students are able to set good deadlines very well. And so let's take a look at our first study, the free choice/no choice study. This study was taking place also during a semester-long executive education course at MIT. Participants were 99 professionals, and most of whom participated in the class via interactive video. The 2 sections of the course were each assigned to a different condition So there was no random assignment of individuals to treatment, but rather a random assignment of sections to treatments. Now, let's take a look at the procedure. During the first lecture, the instructor went over the syllabus with the participants, which included the instructions of this particular study. And one part of the course requirement is that they had to write 3 short papers. Now, for this study, students were spread into 2 sections, one in the no choice section and one in the free choice section. Students in the no choice section were given fixed, evenly spaced deadlines for the papers. And students in the free choice sections were given detailed instructions about setting their own deadlines. These instructions indicated that each student was free to choose the date by when they want to hand in their papers. Now, there are 4 external constraints that were set regarding the dates. First, the students had to hand in their papers no later than the last lecture. Second, students had to announce the deadlines for their submission prior to the second lecture. Third, the dates were final and cannot be changed. And fourth, the dates were binding, such that each day of delay beyond the deadline will cause a 1% penalty in the paper's overall grade. Finally, it was explained clearly that there were no grade advantages for early submissions. For students in the free choice section, there were also many external incentives. They were encouraged to submit all 3 of their papers on the last possible day because this will allow students to have the most time to work on the papers. It would also provide the students the highest flexibility in arranging their workload and the opportunity to learn the most about the topic before submitting the papers. The students also had an incentive to set submission dates late because the penalty would be only applied to late submissions and not to early ones. Finally, students who want to submit assignments early could privately plan to do so without pre-committing to the instructor. Now, let's take a look at the results. The results from the free choice group of people showed that the mean deadlines were significantly earlier than the last possible deadline, which we have 41.78 days before the end of the course for the first paper, 26.07 days before the end for the second paper, and 9.84 days before the end for the third paper. Figure 1 shows that only 43 deadlines, 32%, were set for the final week of class. The majority of the deadlines were set prior to the last lecture, and in fact, only 12 students, which is 27% of the class, chose to submit all 3 papers on the last day of class. So what do these results mean? These results indicated that people are willing to self-impose deadlines to overcome procrastination, even when these deadlines are extremely costly. The students could have chosen less binding private deadlines, but instead chose deadlines that involve more commitment and greater potential cost. For example, a grade penalty for being late. And it showed that they were willing to take the risk of losing these grade points to apply the self-control mechanism of pre-commitment. And from this study, we can answer the first question earlier on, where we asked, are people willing to self-impose meaningful deadlines to overcome procrastination? And the answer to that from this research paper, from this particular study, is yes. People are willing to self-impose deadlines to overcome procrastination, even when these deadlines are costly. Next, we compare the grades in the two sections to see if flexibility in setting deadlines caused higher or lower grades compared with externally imposed, evenly spaced deadlines. The results showed that the grades in the no choice section, which has a mean of 88.76, was higher than the grades in the free choice section, which has a mean of 85.67. This showed that if students do have self-control problems and they use deadlines to overcome these problems, however, they do not set these deadlines optimally. In addition to having a direct effect on our performance, deadlines can also have a secondary effect on other aspects of a performance that also require the investment of time as a resource. And the natural candidate for this measure is the student's performance on the final project that was due on the last day of class. Grades for the final project showed the same effect. Scores were lower in the free choice section, which has a mean of 77, than the higher no choice section, which has a mean of 86. And this also suggests that students with late self-imposed deadlines for the 3 focal tasks might not have had enough time to dedicate to the final project. Although students were instructed about the penalties associated with missing the deadlines, it is possible that students in the free choice section treated these deadlines as less binding because they were self-imposed, because they were chosen themselves. And so to demonstrate that the better performance in the no choice section was caused by the timing of the deadlines and not by the perceived force of the externally imposed deadlines, we compare the performance of the students in the no choice section with the performance of those students in the free choice section who chose evenly spaced dates for submission. And this comparison isolates the effect of deadline type, self versus external, on performance. And if these two groups with similarly spaced deadlines differ in their performance, the overall difference between the sections could be attributed to the nature of the deadlines. However, if students who were spaced their deadlines evenly showed similar performance regardless of the nature of deadlines, regardless of whether it's self-imposed or externally imposed, the overall difference between the section was likely due to the timing of the deadlines. And the results showed that performance between the two sections decreased dramatically and became non-significant when only those students who had evenly spaced deadlines was included in the analysis. And because of this huge similarity, this comparison suggests that the overall effect of self-imposing deadlines was due primarily to the timing of the deadlines, and not just a weaker perceived potency of self-imposed deadlines. And we are also given a graph regarding how the deadlines are distributed regarding the 3 papers over the 14-week period. And although we know that there are many incentives to have all 3 papers due on the last day, on the 14th week, we can see that most of these papers are distributed fairly evenly across all of the 14 weeks, with even some paper that's due on the 2nd week. From the combined results of the pilot studies and study 1, we've come to the conclusion that decision makers who face situations in which they can self-impose deadlines recognize 2 conflicting forces. On one hand, they realize the value of binding themselves to overcome procrastination. However, on the other hand, they understand the normative reasons, the normal reasons to set the deadlines as late as possible. And now, in study 2, we're here to answer the following 2 questions, which are whether self-imposed deadlines improve performance? And if so, whether people know how to set deadlines for maximum performance enhancement. Slide 9. In study 2, we have the proofreading study. The method for this study is that we will have an ad looking for native English speakers to help proofread papers by other students to evaluate writing skill. We also noted that payment would be contingent on the quality of the proofreading, with 10 cents paid per correctly detected error and a $1 penalty for each day of delay. For this study, a total of 60 students will be participating, and they will be randomly assigned to the 3 experimental conditions. Slide 10. Procedure. They used a postmodern text generator to create text that was grammatically correct but not meaningful, such as sexual identity is intrinsically impossible, says Foucault. However, according to the cell by, it is not so much sexual identity that it is intrinsically impossible, such. They've created 3 texts such as this with length about 10 pages each and inserted each of them a total of 100 grammatical and spelling errors. Slide 11. Submitting their tasks early was permitted. However, this does not increase their compensation. Delay in submission, however, would result in a penalty of $1 for each day of delay. In the evenly spaced deadlines condition, participants had to submit one of the 3 texts every 7 days. However, in the self-imposed deadlines condition, they had to choose their own deadlines for each of the 3 texts within the same 3-week period. Slide 12. First, we determined whether the self-imposed deadlines condition replicated the results of the previous studies. The results showed that participants in this condition chose to space out their proofreading tasks, thus showing a preference for self-imposing costly deadlines. Slide 12 continue. We analyzed 3 aspects of performance across different conditions. We have the number of errors detected, delays in submissions, and earnings. All differences were statistically significant as the p-value are all lower than 0.01. And as predicted, the number of errors correctly detected was the highest in the evenly spaced deadlines condition, followed by the self-imposed deadline condition, with the lowest performance in the end deadline condition. This can be seen by the graph in slide 14, where in box A, we have the evenly spaced deadlines being the highest, followed by the self-imposed deadlines, followed by the end deadline being the lowest. Also, this also reflects the delays in submission, as the lower the delay, the more the earnings. And we have the evenly spaced deadline being the lowest at 4 days, followed by the self-imposed deadlines being the second highest, and the end deadline the highest. And again, the earnings table completely represents the performance of each of the 3 categories. Slide 13. Next, we want to compare participants who are in the self-imposed deadline condition, who had spaced their tasks evenly, and we want to compare the specific type of people to participants who are already in the evenly spaced deadline conditions. And when we compare the differences between these 2 groups, we will realize that it decreased dramatically and it became non-significant. The differences became non-significant for all dependent measures. In delay and submissions, we see that there is a decrease in effect size by 55%. In errors detected, we have an effect size reduced by 79%. And earnings, we have an effect size reduced by 55%. This reduction in effect sizes provides additional evidence that a main cause of the lower performance in the self-imposed deadlines conditions compared with the evenly spaced deadline conditions was suboptimal spacing of the tasks. Slide 15. Finally, we asked participants to evaluate their overall performance on 5 attributes: how much they liked the task, how interesting it was, how good the quality of the writing was, how good the grammatical quality was, and how effectively the text communicated the ideas contained in it. They were asked to rate all these 5 things on a 1-point scale, where the higher the number, the higher quality they think it is. And however, the results eventually showed a pattern opposite of the performance results. Slide 16. Participants in the evenly spaced deadline condition liked the task the least, with a mean of 22.1, followed by the participants in the self-imposed deadlines, where we have a mean of 28.12, followed by participants in the end deadline condition, who liked the task the most, where we have a mean of 37.9. These results are not surprising, as the texts were meaningless and the tasks were boring. We would suggest that the pattern would have been reversed if the task had been enjoyable or fun to do. Slide 17. In addition, the participants were asked to estimate how much time they had spent on each of the 3 texts. The results showed that participants in the evenly spaced deadline conditions indicated that they spent most of the time on the task, with 84 minutes. Participants in the self-imposed deadline condition spent an intermediate amount of time, with 69.9 minutes. The participants in the end deadline condition spent the least time on the task, with a mean of 50.8 minutes. Taking all these things, all the results together, the results showed that when deadline constraints increased, performance improved. When performance improves, time spent on the task increased. And when you have time spent on the task increased, the enjoyment of the task decreased. And this decreased mainly because of the low quality of the text and how boring or annoying the task was. Slide 18. Now we can return to the 3 questions posed earlier. Do people self-impose costly deadlines to overcome procrastination? Are self-imposed deadlines effective in improving task performance? Do people set self-imposed deadlines optimally? Based on our results from our studies, the answer to the first 2 questions is yes, and the answer to the last question is no. Our findings demonstrate that people understand the value of binding themselves to overcome procrastination. The participants showed some action in displaying their understanding of their own procrastination problems, but many did not set their deadlines to bind themselves optimally. Although there could be other potential variables that could affect these studies, such as cognitive limitations in calibrating deadlines, or a deliberate mixed strategy of balancing flexibility and self-control. What is clear from our results is that procrastination is a real behavioral problem, and people strategically try to impair it by using costly self-imposed deadlines, and that self-imposed deadlines are not always as effective as some external deadlines in boosting task performance.